Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, Obi discovers his wife's betrayal while selling her car for a supposed upgrade. Uncovering a chat revealing her affair, he confronts her, leading to a divorce. Seeking support from friends and his elderly father, he navigates the emotional aftermath. Taking control of the situation, he keeps the car, finds solace in counseling, hits the gym, and reflects on personal growth amid the turmoil. His wife struggles with remorse, realizing the consequences of her actions, leaving both parties emotionally scarred and grappling with the aftermath of cheating. Now let's get into the story. My wife, 38, was trying to sell her car when she decided to betray me and destroy my hopes for the future. We were married for 4 years and everything was good. I guess I can't say great, because we always struggled a little financially. I, 40, had a job I really enjoyed that paid a little less than a more unpleasant or more demanding job. My wife always told me she just wanted me to be happy, and I told her the same. So she worked at her favorite clothing store. Not too terrible. At least, we both had jobs and could pay the bills. But I think my wife wanted luxury. I think she dreamed of being spoiled like a movie star. That's part of the reason she decided to sell her car. We just paid it off after years of making huge payments, and I was pretty upset. She didn't want to savor the time we had with it. She said she wanted to upgrade by selling it for cash so she could put a huge down payment on the next vehicle. It made sense, but I didn't really like this idea. My wife wanted a nicer car, and her mind was set on it. So she invited a man over to our house to come see and test drive it. But she waited until I was at work and didn't tell me about it. It wasn't until 3 days after his test drive that my wife asked me to take better pictures of the car and interior. After I did, I plugged my phone into the computer we both used, and when the screen came on, there was a chat box opened. In the most recent messages, she thanked him for his generosity, said she really enjoyed being with him, and asked when he could come over again. In earlier messages, she talked about trying to sell her car for an upgrade and how her husband was at work so he could come drive it around a little. I couldn't believe how bad she was at covering her tracks. There was another window open that showed her bank accounts, recent transactions, and the most recent thing was a deposit from PayPal for $200. Not enough to buy a car, but perhaps enough to buy some time in bed with a pretty woman. I was fuming. But it was hard to really feel furious when I couldn't believe she would do this. I trusted her. We were married. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was right in front of me. I kept shaking my head, and my face was stuck in a scowl. I didn't know how to handle this. I kept telling myself my wife had to have a conscience, meaning I wouldn't have to wait long for her to come clean and break down in tears. I came home from work the next day, and she was still acting like everything was fine. While she was in the shower, I got on the computer. This time the chat box and windows were closed, but all I had to do was click login on Messenger and I found their conversation him. According to this, he was in our house and with my wife earlier that same day. I was really starting to feel the fury now. Not only had she failed to come clean or show any signs of remorse, but she brought him over and did it again. I didn't know it was possible to feel the level of anger I felt at that moment. I printed screenshots of the chat, closed the chat box, and put them in my nightstand just before my wife came out of the shower. I think she realized she hadn't had intimate with me in a week, and I was probably expecting it. Otherwise, I might get suspicious. She was already naked, so she got into bed with me and started getting really close. I was stiff as a board, but not the important part. I couldn't lay with her, and I couldn't keep pretending the way she was. I jumped out of bed, whipped open the drawer, and slapped the papers down on the bed with her. I screamed at the top of my lungs to ask what this was. She jumped out of her skin and started breathing rapidly while trembling. She looked at the pages, then back to me. She said nothing. I yelled again, so she squeaked that she was sorry. She offered no defense. She was just terrified and wanted me to feel bad for scaring her. I said whatever happens from this point forward is what she brought on herself. So if she doesn't like it, she needs to rethink her actions. I gathered some essentials, the paper evidence, and the keys to the car she was trying to sell because I helped her pay it off. I went to my dad's house, who was 77 years old at this point, and he was just happy I was there to stay for a while. I didn't tell him what was going on as I filed for divorce. My supporters were my friends from work and the people who shared my passion with me. My wife wasn't able to sell or use the car since I took the keys, and when the divorce was final, it was awarded to me and she had to move out. Infidelity screws a lot of people over. But I'm glad she didn't get out of the consequences. There were several times when she called me, really and hating herself because she had a moment of clarity and saw what a piece of crap she was for doing that to me. She's had trouble connecting with anyone, even as friends, because she told me she feels like they can tell. She doesn't know who she is anymore. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I never saw the chat. And that scared them. I've started going to counseling. At least I know that I'll know when I'm ready to start dating. I've started going to the gym to ease my stress. And before this, I was not a well-built person. That's another positive outcome. I'm in the best shape of my life. Today's second story. In this story, Opie discovers her affair with her boss, confronts them publicly by posting evidence on social media, causing a scene at the ball. He decides to divorce her, leaves her stranded, and later learns he's STD-free. The boss is fired, and the couple leaves town together. He finds solace in his dog and hears his ex was dumped after 5 months. Now let's get into the story. I'll tell you a pretty sad story that happened to me. I hope this never happens to anyone else, but maybe my story can help you if it does. My wife was invited to a company ball. It was really fancy, so ballroom attire was required. 2 weeks prior to the ball, she started to get really anxious about everything. She even asked me if I was sure I wanted to go. She said if I would rather stay home and relax, that would be fine. She usually begged me to go places with her, and if I insisted on staying home, that she gave me a list of chores to do. The fact that she offered me the idea of relaxation was weird. I told her I was going and she could relax about it. When it got close to the day of the ball, my wife was using her phone excessively. She never told me why, and I didn't feel welcome to ask. We were in the car at one point, and her phone connected to the Bluetooth and she freaked out. She started pushing the power button a few times. When the Bluetooth didn't disconnect, her face turned really red and she just started looking out the window. It was so worrisome. What was she so paranoid about me seeing? She went into the store and couldn't have been too paranoid because her phone was laying on her seat. I decided to look through it. I didn't find anything interesting in the texts, so I checked her email and an opened email said she had test results to see on her doctor's website. I looked and it was a test result positive for an incurable STD. I could not believe what I was reading and the magnitude of what I just found. I wondered if she was planning to tell me anytime soon. We hadn't had intimate in 3 months, the longest we ever went. These results were date. It from 4 days ago. Did I have what she had? My mind was reeling when my wife started running back to the car with groceries. I thought I had enough time to check. One more thing. I did a search in her apps for WhatsApp, and boom, she had it. I opened it and saw a string of texts to a man named Michael. The only Michael I knew she was associated with was her boss. I locked her phone and put it on her seat. She got in the car and was relieved to see her phone. She said she wasn't sure if she dropped it and looked at me closely for a few seconds while she tried to figure out if I looked through it. I put on my best poker face and drove us home. We arrived at the ball before I had another chance to check her phone. I didn't sleep with her, and I didn't ask her anything. I wanted to know when she was planning to tell me this terrible news. I already considered the possibility of her cheating on me because I didn't think I had the same thing she did, but I couldn't know for sure until I got tested. Why, unless she was cheating on me, would she hesitate to tell me this diagnosis? All of this was going through my head as we entered the ball. We had seats at a table, which is where my wife set down her little handheld purse. I thought about trying to sneak a peek at her phone. We were greeted by her boss personally. He kissed my wife's hand and told her he was so glad she was there. She introduced me to him unenthusiastically, and he greeted me with the same level of dismissal. He asked me if he could have the first dance with my lovely wife, and I felt like I didn't have a choice. Besides, I wanted to look at my wife's phone while she danced with him. It looked like they were whispering to themselves. It was weird, and I had just about enough. I started looking through my wife's phone without any care if she saw me. I opened her WhatsApp and discovered that Michael confirmed precisely what time we would get here. And scrolling up just a bit more showed that they planned to sneak away. As soon as I went to the bathroom or stepped outside for a smoke, I looked up at them in shock. They were at the bar getting drinks. Now I looked through more of her messages with him, talking about the intimate they've had and how they want to have it again. My wife even mentioned her recent diagnosis to him, and he apologized for not telling her about it. She freaked out over text, asking him how she was supposed to tell her husband she suddenly had an incurable STD after 7 years of marriage. He offered that perhaps she wouldn't ever need to tell me if she just left me for him. I took screenshots of it all and sent the collection to my phone. Then I used her phone to post it all on her social media platforms. She was friends with people all over this ballroom. I saw people looking at their phone, gasping, and then looking up to find my wife or the boss. I included a few messages of slander towards their coworkers and employees. I watched someone urgently alert the boss to a problem, and he left the ballroom to talk about it. My wife was left alone, so she started walking back towards our table. She looked extremely uncomfortable, like she noticed something was wrong and people were staring at her. I stared at her too, fake smiling with my hands folded in front of me. She greeted me skeptically. I simply said, "I'm going to file for divorce because you are no longer my wife." Her jaw dropped and she sat next to me, asking me what was going on. I handed her back her phone and told her to check what she posted a few minutes ago. She was really confused and looked at me like I wasn't making sense. When she opened her phone, I saw the moment of agony show up on her face. She looked at me with tears in her eyes, her hand covering her mouth. She realized her boss was most likely fired, which meant she would be fired. She realized everyone in the room was staring at her because they now knew, officially not speculating, that she was sleeping with the boss and both of them had an STD. How despicable and disgusting. She ugly cried while she grabbed her stuff and left the hotel, heading for my car. I followed her slowly, nodding in acknowledgement to every person that eyed me up. I had the keys in my pocket and I was not giving her a ride to my house. When I got to the car, she was standing there with her arms crossed. I asked her what she thought she was doing. She said she wanted to get in the car and go home. I asked her if she met her parents' house or her boss' house. She looked at me, shocked and upset. She asked me not to do this and said I couldn't be serious. I said I would show her how serious I was, that she was never coming back to my house or getting in my car again. I unlocked my door, only got in and locked it again. She was screaming at me to let her in, but it quickly turned to desperate sobbing. A crowd gathered outside the hotel, watching us by our car. They all knew she was the one sleeping with the boss. She was the one with the STD. She gave up on trying to get in the car with me and opted for sprinting into the woods lining the parking lot. I drove home. I didn't care what happened to her anymore. I scheduled a doctor's appointment the next day. It was 3 days later that I got back my test results, which thankfully said I was clean. I also heard my ex's boss was fired. As soon as her boss got an opportunity to sneak away from the intense scrutiny he faced, he packed his bags and left. On the way, he stopped to pick up my ex. They haven't returned to town since then. I put all my ex's belongings outside between 2 tarps. That was more consideration than she ever gave me. However, she never returned for it. My most helpful support through the breakup was my dog. Also heard my ex was dumped by Michael after 5 months.